I made almost $1,200 selling a course that didn't exist. I had no modules, no fancy funnel, no elaborate landing page. I didn't spend months recording videos, creating worksheets, or trying to make everything perfect. And looking back, that $1,200 wasn't really the important part. The important part was what the $1,200 proved. It proved that I identified a person I could help, a problem they wanted solved, and a result that they were willing to pay me to help them achieve. If that sounds like you, continue listening to this episode of the podcast. Now, what happened, in other words, was that how that happened was I validated the idea before I made it. And that little experiment eventually generated thousands of dollars, multiple cohorts of satisfied clients, and fundamentally changed the way I think about creating books, courses, programs, and offers. Because I see far too many creators doing the exact opposite. They spend hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars on software and funnels and landing pages and courses and coaches and programs. They spend months creating the thing and then finally put it in front of people and discover that nobody really wants it. No one's asked for it. So today I want to tell you the story about how I made that first $1,200. Actually, it was $1,100, but I rounded it up and made it 12. More importantly, I want to show you the ridiculously simple process behind it and how you can use the same principle to figure out what your audience might actually pay you for before you spend months building it. Because before you build the funnel, you need to build the proof. Now, I started this with, if you've been watching me and following my videos, you know that I'm all about books and publishing and helping you publish books, and this can roll into courses and other programs. But in the context of this conversation I want to have with you today is I started with a coloring book, and I titled that book Never Too Late to Make It Happen. And somewhere on the video here, if you're watching the video iteration of this on YouTube, you'll see the cover of it flash up here really quickly. And I want to tell you how that book came to be. So I wanted to do something that would allow me to exercise all parts of myself creatively. I had been working in self-publishing for well over 15 years. At that point, a coloring book was never anything that was on my mind, but it was something that was different than what I had done. Now, in the past, when I decided to do this book, is like I said, it was during the pandemic. Um, a lot of the client work I was doing was no longer available, and I needed someplace to channel that energy. I'm an artist as well. I have some skill in graphic design, and of course, book publishing, and some knowledge in marketing. So I decided to put this book together again, called Never Too Late to Make It Happen, and I put it up on Amazon. And then, quite frankly, I forgot about it. I mean, I didn't forget about it, but it wasn't anything I was focusing on. I wasn't trying to make a bunch of money from it. It was just a way to express my creativity, put it out there. Now, I'd say really a year later, I had done other things in between that related to this topic. But about a year later, I was in a coaching program where the coach gave us a challenge, and the challenge was to pick a topic that we could teach about and set a date to do a multi-day experience. Some people call them challenges. So there were two topics that I felt there was many I could talk about, but there were two in particular that I felt I could really deep dive in on. And one was on podcasting, because I, at that point, had published and launched and started three podcasts of my own. And the other one was this coloring book that I had done a year prior. So we got the marching orders to set a date. And I thought about it and I said, okay, well, what could I talk about? What could, better still, what problem could I solve? And so I again had the publishing background, I had the design background, but I also thought about what I did to create that book. And this was the actual thing I did. There was certain research I did to create that book. I did my research and so forth. And I decided I'm going to pick the coloring book. I had no attachment to it. I said, if this goes over, great. If it doesn't, I'll move on to the podcasting conversation. So long story short, I went ahead and I moved forward and I thought about it and I said, okay, if someone's going to create a coloring book, or any book for that matter, but in this context, a coloring book, what are they going to need first before they start putting together files and designing covers and formatting and all that stuff? What are they going to need first? Well, the obvious answer for me was they need an idea for the book. So instead of going right into all the mechanics of putting the book together, I decided to make my 3-day challenge be about how to find an idea for your book, how to find an idea for your coloring book, and how to validate that idea. And I went back through everything I did to create my book, Never Too Late. So I said, okay, I could teach that. I could teach that in I could have taught it in one session, but I decided to spread it up over 3 days. So I did a 3-day workshop called Validate Your Coloring Book Idea Before You Make It. And my content that I used to get people to that workshop was I pulled on my marketing background. I knew how to, still know how to, but I know how to run Facebook ads. So I decided to run an ad. I, use all of my design skills, my graphic design skills, all of that. I put together the graphic, really simple. I put together an ad. I ran the ad on Facebook. And I remember I spent $67 on that ad. And I got leads, basically the question asking about them wanting to create a coloring book. And I ran that ad and people saw it on Facebook and they clicked on it. And the ad type I used was called a lead form ad. And that when people would fill out the form, actually was auto-populated with the information already in there, but they could change it or just if they wanted to. So they could just click on a couple of buttons and they would immediately be sent over to a Facebook group that I had created on the same subject. So that was my container. Inside of that container, I introduced myself. I wanted to meet each one, each of them. I did the due diligence to let them know that it wasn't just some rando thing that they had signed up for, that it was actually an experience that I wanted to have. But I wanted to lead them into an interactive experience with me, not just a passive group where I was barely participating and they were just kind of hanging out. So after a few people I got in there, I announced that I was going to do this free workshop where I would help multi-day experience, actually, I should say, where I would help them find and validate their coloring book idea before they made it. So I did that workshop. I went through all the process that I did to actually develop my book idea. And then at the end of that experience, I invited the cohort to join me for a one-on-one Zoom call where I could ask them questions about their experience. What did they think? What did they like? What would they like, like to see more? I just wanted to get a sense of who were attending. Because at each level, they were becoming more and more invested. They became invested when they clicked on the link for the ad. They became invested when they joined the Facebook group. They became more invested when they signed up for the workshop series. And they became more invested when they actually attended the workshop series with me. So I said, this is the reason why I did this whole experience you just went through. I am thinking about creating a course where I will help you take the idea that you just found and validated and help you turn it into a published book that you can hold in your hands and do it in 30 days. I said, if I offer that, would you sign up for that? Would you pay for that? Both said yes. So I waited about a week and I said, okay, I need to go back to everyone who said they would sign up and those who attended the workshop. And I presented a much more condensed experience where I literally walked through what I did to develop my book. And I extended the invitation to work with me, and I would help them take the idea they just developed and get it out of their head and into their hands within a time framed window. It's key in the way I verbalized all of that. I made the offer at that time. That first cohort was $97 for that workshop series. I had 12 people sign up for that workshop at $97. One person actually refunded because she felt like it was going to be too technical for her. and she couldn't keep up with all the different moving parts that I was going to talk about. Hence why it validated why I didn't want to start with that to begin with. So I actually I did it to my own advantage by selling them on the idea first and the mechanics of it later. So anyway, 11 people stayed in the program. I made $1,200. I refunded 100, and I helped them develop their book. Now, here's the interesting part. After the books were published and in their hands, I picked back up my second alternative idea if the coloring book idea wasn't going to work, which was podcasting. And I launched the Coloring Book Creator podcast to celebrate the authors who had completed the process and actually had the published book in their hand. So I did that to celebrate them, to announce them, and to let the world know that they are now published authors. Now, that original version of the podcast is what you're listening to now. A couple of years ago, I rebranded it to the Published Creator podcast. But those original episodes are actually in the archives. So if you're listening on iTunes or you're listening on, whatever, if you scroll down to like the very, I think I have like 70 or 80 episodes, you'll find those first 5 or 6 episodes are from those authors who completed their books. So I thought about all of that process. I kind of broke down, sometimes we do things and forget what we've done because it just almost like we just kind of go through it all. And what I realized with that, going through that journey, was how I didn't do it by investing a lot of time, money, or resources in setting up everything first and then trying to sell it. I didn't spend a lot of time setting up landing pages. I didn't have my landing page was actually the Facebook ad in the context of what I used. Because I said a lead format is what I used, and that actually gives you a form that you can fill out and has the contact information there. So that was my lead, that was my landing page. My lead magnet was the Facebook group. Now I would use school because I have a school community. I have the link to that in the show notes if you want to go check that. I highly recommend you go check out the Published Creator School community. So that was the community was really my lead magnet. That was the first introductory lead magnet. The secondary lead magnet was a 3-day workshop, validate your book idea before you make it. That was my next source or my next lead magnet. When it came to actually developing and asking for the sale, I didn't do a sales page or anything of that nature. I just created a link in Stripe to pay me and a URL that Stripe gave me, and I popped the link into the Zoom chat when I was doing my follow-up presentation, and that's how I sold made the first $1,200. So what I'm saying is that if you think you need to go get all these fancy tools, you don't at the validation stage. You don't. You don't need a website. You don't need a fancy cart checkout with the upsells and downsells and all that stuff. Really, all you need is a place to live stream, or like this. It could be Zoom or it could be Google Meet. You need something to put in front of people to get their attention, calling out what it is that they most want, what they desire, or the problem that they are currently experiencing that they want relief from. That ties into the content that you put out. So as I said before, I used an ad, but you don't have to use an ad, but you could use one. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's a random piece of content you put up or it's an ad that you put up. What you put in that ad or that post has to speak to that person's desire or their problem or both. It has to speak to them. So the reason why I created the validate before you make it, or the content to cash flow co-working live sessions that I do is because I have found in my experience many creative people really are not clear about that. We have a lot of ideas, we have a lot of different things that we could do. We kind of jump around and it's kind of hard to stay focused. And I wanted to help focus. I wanted to help narrow things down, not by taking away all the other things you're passionate about, but by helping you focus on the one problem, one desire, one customer, one thing that you know you can help them do, and one opportunity for them to work with you. The power of one. When I focused on ultimately, the goal, yes, was to help them develop the book, but I didn't start with that. As I said earlier, I started with one idea. What's the one idea? Let's find and validate the book idea before you go to the process of producing it. That automatically set up, I have the idea now. Now he's going to help me produce it. I focused on one type of book. I didn't focus on novels. I didn't focus on, the nonfiction type books. I focused on one idea, a coloring book, specifically a coloring book, not planners, not journals, not any of those things. Although I did do that later, but I focused on one idea, one product category. And I was able to do that because it's what I had done for myself. So again, the thing I want you to take away from this is, where were you focusing on too many different things? What is the thing that they have to get first before they can get to the next thing? If the ultimate thing is, in my case, is to produce the book, you have to have an idea for the book before you can produce it. You can take the word book out and replace that with course, with program, with even, think about it from even the most basic stance, even for, let's say, lunch or dinner. You can say, well, the first problem is I'm hungry. Well, then the next question is, what are you hungry for? What do you have, or what a lot of people ask you, what do you have a taste for? So you can say, well, I have a taste for, let's say, a hamburger. All right, then, well, then of the options for hamburgers, what are those options? And then you list off the three or four wherever restaurants that you may be familiar with that has a good hamburger, or a hamburger just to satiate the desire that you have for the hamburger. You see what I'm saying? So each thing has to set up the next thing. What's the most fundamental thing that that person wants? What do they have a taste for? What options are available so that they can pick the one that they're going to have? If we apply that same thinking to our structuring of our offer, our program, our book, whatever it is, it narrows it down and you actually become more creative, because guess what? Now you can deep dive into the one thing that you provided. So I started out with a free workshop that led to a paid workshop that led to a marketing experience, which was the podcast, which led to me working with them on a deeper level with their marketing and branding and promotion. But if I had started with that in the very beginning, I may would have lost them, because I was going beyond where they were ready to experience at that point, based on how they got introduced to me to begin with. Now, what I have also found with my clients that I worked with is the same principle. What is the one idea that you have? What is the one customer, the one problem or desire? What's the one idea? What's the one deliverable that you can give them to help them experience? The operative word here is experience what your ultimate product is going to do. I'll use my client, Anna Schmidt, Dr. Anna Schmidt. When Anna came to me, her book is pictured here in the video. If you're listening to this on any of the uh, podcast feed, I suggest checking out the YouTube video, because you can see it in the video. But I'll put the link in the description as well. When Anna came to me, we were actually developing her book, The Unwritten Rules of Work. When we were working on that book, and it was, thank goodness, didn't foresee at the time. Well, that'll be another episode for another podcast where I'm going to interview Anna, and we'll deep dive into that even more. But for the purpose of this conversation, her book was what was going to be months before it was actually ready to go. But she had built up a strong social media presence. She had people that were following her, engaging with her. And I said, you've got all this energy going as you're developing this book, but there's no container in which to bring people, those people that are following you, into off of that ecosystem into your world. So the first thing I suggested that we do immediately once we started working together, even as we were developing the book and the cover and all that stuff, was I said, we've got to get people off of those platforms. At that time, it was TikTok, into her own ecosystem, which was, in that case, we did do a landing page. She was more advanced. So I'm not saying this is the formula you have to do for everyone, but I'm saying this was what we used for her. We set up a landing page, offered a free sample chapter, That was great. That was the most fundamental thing we could do, but that's not where the money came in. The money came in when I suggested that we launch a school community where she could coach people in real time, a live interactive experience, not a one-way conversation like on TikTok, but a two-way conversation. She could actually interact with the people who would be readers of the book, potentially become consulting clients of hers, and she could start generating money as she was building out her book. So we launched the Unwritten Rules School community. We started getting subscribers right away that were paying at that time $15 a month. The price has now doubled. And she was starting to generate money as she was working through her content as she was finishing up her book. So I'm telling you, the live interactive experience is really where your income opportunity is at. It truly is, because again, we can do all kinds of things to talk at people, content, and as it relates to the live co-working session, if you decide to join me, which I highly recommend that you do, if you decide to join me for that live interactive experience, unlike most webinars where there's a bunch of slides and the person leading it is telling you, walking you through the whole process, and there's going to be a sales pitch at the end. No shade about that, but I'm just saying that's typically how webinars run. This isn't what this is at all. If you decide to join me for the Content to Cash Flow co-working session, that's exactly what it is. It's a live co-working session. I will give you a workbook, a digital workbook that you can fill out inside the workbook. You don't have to download or print it. The only way you can get the workbook is to join me live. You have to be on there live. I don't give it out beforehand. We actually go through each of the questions in the workbook. I give you some time to work through each of the questions, and then we get that whole workbook filled out. And then I'll pick one, if there's time, two people, and do live hot seat coaching in real time based on what was filled out in the workbook. The goal being one thing, as I said, one thing, one experience, one offering, this case, the co-working session with the workbook to give you clarity on one thing. Once you have clarity there, not only that, but you can have momentum. And from that momentum, then you can start building out your own content to cash flow primer, what I call a primer. But you've got to have the foundation set up first, kind of like your roadmap. You have to set your roadmap up first, like your GPS to know where you're going. Once you have that, then yes, there will be an invitation to work with me on a deeper level where we will take everything you did in that workbook, we will take that into the primer, and we will build out your own system, very similar to what I did when I launched the Coloring Book Creator. So the goal being is that you walk out of it with clarity about the one customer with the one desire or problem, the one solution that you can provide with the one mechanism in which to help deliver that to them. You will walk out with that done. You will also receive support and coaching on how to set up the whole thing, from what do you talk about on your live stream that you do, because I definitely believe in an interactive experience. You really need that component. What to do to follow up with the people who join your live interactive experience so that you can really zero in on and really dial in what the messaging is going to be. Because again, we can speculate. As I said, when I first started, I didn't go straight to the sales card. I did the experience. I got people connected to me and to the message. I had clarity about what they wanted. I deep dived even further to get more questions answered. 1 week after I did that experience, I came back with the offer, which was to sign up for the first cohort of that workshop series. And that's how I made that first $1,200. So it happened very quickly, but I couldn't have done that had I tried to figure it all out, design the whole course, record all the videos, set up the course platform, set up the landing page, do all the different bells and whistles, and I hadn't validated anything. I've seen too many people with too many great ideas, too much talent, too much ability to be able to help people, and they get drowned in all of the mishigash, all the moving parts. You don't need all of that in the beginning. You just need a way to have a two-way conversation. Again, Zoom or Google Meet, or you can do it in person if you want to. One solution that you can help them get that gets them closer to the thing they desire, And once you've gotten that level of clarity and they feel connected to you as a person, as a teacher, as a guide, then when you offer the next logical step, they're far more apt to say yes to it because they have already felt like you've helped them solve one part. Obviously, the next part is going to be this, and you've proven you can help them do that. Now, again, I can't guarantee you're going to have exactly the same result that I have. I can't guarantee you're going to make any money at all. That's just, I can't do that. But what I can say is I can get you a lot closer to getting clarity about what that could be than you would be if you're doing it on your own. That I can guarantee. So again, if this appeals to you, I recommend checking out the link here in the description or click on the QR code that's on this video and join me for my next live content to cash flow live co-working session. At the time I'm recording this, it's just $10. I am so confident in this experience that if you come to the session, you have to attend live, you come to the session, you do the work, and you just feel like, you know what, that just didn't do it for me. I'll refund you $10. That's how confident I am in this. So again, I'm creating this because again, I'm tired of seeing creative people lose their momentum, lose their steam, lose their passion because they're caught up in all of their technology. They're confused about what to offer, how much to sell it for, who to sell it to. They're not clear about the messaging. They're not clear about, they're just not clear. And that's why when I had my first debrief session from my last session, the number one thing that I was told repeatedly was, this session gave me clarity. I came in thinking it was this, and I walked out now knowing it's this. That there was everything. That there was absolutely everything. And I'll say this one last piece about it. You don't get clarity and then you act. You act and then you get clarity. Okay. So if this sounds like something that you want to participate in, something that you want to experience for yourself, I highly invite you to join me for my next Content to Cash Flow Co-working live session. Again, the link is in the description here in the video. If it's on YouTube or in the show notes, if it's over on Spotify, however you're listening to this podcast. And as soon as you sign up, you'll immediately be directed over to a Zoom page at the time I'm recording this that you can register for the spot. I may add other dates on, but right now I just have one date right now at the time I'm recording this. So you can join. But again, in order to participate, you have to join live. You have to join live. If for some reason you sign up and you can't join live for this session that is coming up, then you'll be extended the invitation to join for the next session that I do. So again, I did this because I want to make sure that everyone walks away from this feeling a lot more confident in what it is that they have to offer and what it is that they do. As a result of using this formula that I've been sharing with you, is I went from that initial program that I sold for $97 to now I charge over $5,000 to work with me. You're getting this first level of experience with me for actually cheaper than than a burger and fries at McDonald's nowadays. I don't know what the price is anymore. But anyway, so and you ideally will be able to generate enough income to be able to even get something a little nicer than a Big Mac. I'm just saying. So anyway, thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. Hope you got a lot of value in it. I hope that this speaks to you. You'll join me in my next live cohort of the Content to Cash Flow session. And again, there's also going to be a link here to join me in my school community. I'd love for you to pop over there. That's totally free to join. And let me know what your thoughts are about what you heard in this episode and how I could support you further in helping you to get that idea out of your head and out of your heart and into your hands and the people that you're here to serve. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you on the next episode of the podcast.